In this video, I will share with you how to configure management via Telnet on ASR or iOS-XR nodes. As you know, in iOS nodes, to configure Telnet access, you actually go into the line VTY04, for example, and then you will set your configuration there with a password or an access class and so forth. But in iOS-XR is done differently. So I'll show you the syntax and configuration. So I'll start with conf, and then the syntax or the command is telnet vrf default for the default VRF, and then you can set IPv4 or IPv6. Let me just do the question mark here. So IPv4 in our case, and then server. So you're setting up the Telnet server on the iOS-XR node, and then you have to set the max servers sessions. So you can have up to, or you can go up to 100. We set it for argument's sake to 5. So this should be normally enough to get my Telnet session going, and I will attempt to Telnet from the iOS node. So I'll commit my config, and from the previous session I have already enabled routing, OSPF routing, to the loopback between the loopback addresses, or in a way that loopbacks are advertised on both nodes. So if I do show route which is the loopback address on the iOS node, I can see that I have a route for this loopback address on the iOS node. Okay, so let's try to telnet to the iOS-XR node from the iOS node, from router 1. So telnet, and I will use the loopback address of the XRV node. So I can have access, and my username and password they already set. So that command is enough to telnet to the XRV node. Now, in production, you don't want anyone that has a route to your loopback addresses or to your interface addresses to log in. So what you have to do, you have to protect your Telnet access, just like you do in iOS with the access classes. There's two different methods you can do this. So if I just go up to the config that we had earlier for the Telnet, for enabling the Telnet server. So here you can see you can add an access list where you can permit and deny and so forth. But I prefer a different way for this. And that's adding the configuration on the control plane. So if I go to control plane, management plane, and then what I want to protect or have rules for is the in-band access. And then here I have the option to select which interface. So if I do question mark, which interface do I want to have these rules applied for? I would like it for all of them. And here I have to allow, or can allow, whichever protocols that I want to have access. And in my case, I will use Telnet, and then peer, and then the address, IP address of the peer that you want to allow to Telnet inbound. So address IPv4, and then I will put in the loopback address of the iOS node, router 1, and that was 222. As always, I just like to check what is it that I'm adding in terms of configuration. So control plane, then down to the management plane, then in-band, and that shows all interfaces, and then I'm allowing Telnet peer and the address of this peer. Then I can commit. So to check this, what I'm going to do is to go back to my router R1, which is iOS based, and I will create a new loopback address. So for example, that would be loopback 1, and I give it address 11. Let me just check what address I'm putting in. So it's the host address. And just to be sure, I will check whether I have a root for this loopback address. So show root. So I do have a root. Can I ping it? Sourcing from loopback 0 of the XR node. Yes, I can. So in theory, because I have only allowed the Telnet session to come in from this IP address, the loopback 0, I should not be able to Telnet if I source my session from loopback 1. So let's attempt or test this. So Telnet, loopback address of the IOS-XR node, and then I'll force it to IPv4. I'll force the source interface, and I'll choose loopback 1. So the connection is refused, which means that my control plane or Telnet access restrictions are working as intended. Now let's try again. Sourcing from loopback 0, which is permitted. And as you can see, I have access. So just to recap, the configuration needed to enable Telnet management are Telnet VRF default IPv4 server max servers, and you could choose the max number of sessions that you wish. And then for my data plane protection, auto control which hosts or subnet can manage my XR node via Telnet. This was my configuration. Control plane, management plane, in-band, I chose all interfaces, and I'm allowing Telnet. So you can also allow other protocols if that's a need for SSH, for example. The principles remain the same. You can also have subnets instead of hosts. I hope you found this session informative and educational. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them below. And once again, thank you for watching.